Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 913. I had the white pieces and started off with c4. Black went with e5 here, and I went knight c3, so all very normal so far. And f5, pretty rare move at this point. And I think it's not that great. I think with good play, white should be able to get an advantage out of this. But it is kind of interesting, so it's not totally unplayable. And if you don't challenge it, say you go with g3 here, which is the top choice, I think black can get quite a comfortable setup like this. d6, say bishop g2, just following the main move here, knight f6. And then, well, d3 is the top choice. There's also e3, or the computer move. The computer was suggesting b3, leading to a slight advantage for white. It was actually giving a slight advantage to black in the case of some of these other moves. So in any case, it's around even, and it seems like black is pretty comfortable here. So I think if you want to challenge black's setup here, you really have to go back and look at the second move here, d4, which is pretty interesting. It's the way you respond to the Grand Prix attack when colors are reversed. Now, when colors are reversed, the white would be playing these moves, and black would not have had time to put a knight here. So if you can imagine this, the move d4 here would be met by pawn takes, and then the knight would come out with the idea of rounding up this pawn. Now, this is impossible in this situation because white, with the extra move, has put a knight on c3. So I wasn't entirely sure this was the right way to play it. But it turns out this is just good. You have to take with the queen here, which I did. And then if black continues on with knight f6, then queen e3 check. And look at this funny move. King f7 is the move in the opening book. So you know something must have gone wrong here. Queen e7 seems to be playable as well. And yeah, you can just play a move after queen e7. You can just play a move like g3 here. And you know, your queen is supported by the bishop. And so there's not going to be any pawn damage if black chooses to trade queens. Black's queen is kind of in the way, and white has a lead in development. This exchange will bring another piece out. The other bishop will come here. The knight will come to one of those squares, and it seems like white just has an edge here in development. So that is you know, reasonable. It's all reasonable for white. So anyway, he played queen f6 in this position, and we're just out of the opening book. And this also leads to positions that are good for white. You know, it's not a huge advantage, but it's noticeable. Let's see. I could have gone with queen e3 right away. Even here, queen e3 check. Well, this time he can block with the queen up here. It's a little bit different, but I can trade and develop the bishop and maybe get some play against the e5 square here. But again, you can see the lead in development that white has out of this. So that's why I can't really recommend black's opening, although it is kind of interesting and offbeat. Anyway, I played knight f3 here, just defending the queen. That also turns out to be a good move. If he trades, it's just helping my development once again. So he comes with knight c6, and I just drop my queen back at this point. Goes bishop to b4. Sorry, bishop b4. And I go bishop d2. So he goes d6. I think it's all in the range of about even, but here I could have played a little better with knight d5 immediately. You know, I like to kind of get all my pieces out before I start playing adventurously, although I eventually decide to do that. I kick the bishop back first, and he should take, probably. This is better. He takes, I take, and queen g6. And again, this is some kind of slight edge to white. Bishop a5 actually gives me a pretty big edge, and maybe winning with correct play. I mean, the engine was between +1 and +2 around here. And I find some good moves here. b6, kicking the bishop back. Knight d5, that also was recommended. Kicking the queen back. And then I just traded out with knight takes b6. And so that's where I give up my big advantage. So the way to continue and keep the advantage, at least according to the chess engine, is with this knight g5 move. Again, it's the kind of thing I'm not that comfortable with because you know, my king is still in the center I need to move the e-pawn or the g-pawn so that the bishop has his way to get out, and then I need to castle. And here I am playing with my knights in the middle of the board. But, well, if it's just good, sometimes, the queen doesn't have so many squares. Going to f8 seems to be the best reply so as to put the brakes on the c5 move. And then, well, just to give you some computer lines here, I don't know if I would ever think to play like this, but a4, a5, well, I was threatening the bishop. That's kind of logical. Takes, I don't know about taking, if I would have thought of that, but taking and grabbing the bishop. I guess this is a simple way to create some pawn damage here, and then play e3. And this seems to be a decent edge for white. The computer plays in an even more extreme fashion, where after knight takes a5, it plays with c5. It sacks a pawn here, and then plays with rook a3. So this is an example of kind of crazy computer play. I mean, maybe it's good. Black's king is open, but how am I ever going to complete my development? It's just, I guess the computer's out to win the game before finishing development. It's true. If you can just win the game out of the box, you don't have to finish your development. But anyway, I could not see myself playing like that. But the other line with knight g5 and then taking later after kind of pushing the a-pawn to force him to move his a-pawn forward, and then grabbing the exchange, or taking the bishop then to double his b-pawns. That seems reasonable to me. Taking right away is not so great, because it also, in addition to, well, it gives me the bishop pair, but it also opens up this a file for his rook. So in a way, it's kind of improving his pawn structure. This is a very solid pawn structure over here on the queen side, not many weaknesses, and he has some more scope for his rook. So, I did get the bishop pair, but he got something as well. So this is back in the range of about even now. So I go e3, he goes knight f6, go bishop e2. Could have gone bishop c3. This might have been a little better. Bishop c3 with the idea of, not that bishop, bishop c3, the other bishop, with the idea that if the knight comes in here to e4, then I can drop this bishop back to b2. I end up doing some maneuver like that, but he had, in the meantime, he had some opportunities to trade off this dark squared bishop. So I went bishop e2 here. The chess engine is actually recommending, let's see, after bishop e2. Yeah, the chess engine is recommending knight e4. That's what I wanted to say here. And then he can grab the bishop pair here. Instead, he played the move bishop to e6, not as good. And I do have a good move here. So here's a little, it's not a tactics quiz exactly, just general chess understanding. What's the best move in this position? Okay, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. There's only one best move here, and it should have kind of leaked out at you if you take a moment to survey the board and look at the moves available. I'm giving the answer away now. The best move is knight to g5, and it's a simple idea. He has to move the queen, and then you take the bishop. So you just get rid of that light squared bishop. You eliminate all the pressure on this pawn. Queen e6 was attacking that pawn, and then you have the bishop pair with no bishops to oppose them. So it's just a good position for white. Instead, after he played bishop e6, he was attacking the c pawn, and I just defended it. And so once again, we're back in the range of about even. Let's see, he played h6 here. We both castled. And then I went c5. c5 is maybe not the best, but it's an interesting move. And all the moves seem to lead to some kind of equality here. I looked at a couple of different ways to improve, and there doesn't seem to be much of anything. And this at least opens up a few more lines. I always like to do that. So he takes, I take. He could just keep on taking, but as I said, this also leads to equality. All the lines I looked at seem to lead to equality. He can go to e4 here to kick my queen. I can just drop back here. Drop back to c2. That all seems to be okay. Instead, he played knight e4 right away. This is also all right. I get to take a pawn here, and he took back with his knight. Yeah, I think actually it's kind of a neat maneuver because this way he gets to keep his pawns together. You know, so I have this isolated pawn. He has a pair of pawns, which are, you know, they can protect each other a little bit. So maybe he has a little bit of an edge there with the open A file, but I have the bishop pair. So it's a case where there's compensating advantages for both sides and about even overall. Let's see. I went rook d1 here. I went rook f d8, opposing me. I went bishop to c3, so I'm just trying to improve my pieces here. He goes knight e4, kicking my bishop, and I do get this bishop to b2 maneuver in. So, you know, he missed his chance to trade off that bishop. He had it for a while there, but now it's gone. It takes, plays rook d8, kicking my queen, go over to c1, and he plays bishop to b3. Yeah, I didn't go to c2 because I didn't want to walk into that bishop to b3 move and lose a tempo. So I go knight to d4. The chess engine didn't like knight d4 so much. It thought rook to b1 was a little better, but I think it's okay. Let's see, knight d4, he takes, I take. I mean, it improves his bishop. And then he played c6. Well, here's the point. He could have played c5 here, and that would be interesting for black. I can't take it because of the pin. So it actually just loses a piece. So after he plays c5, I have to drop my bishop back to c3, and yeah, it's gained a little something from him. He's kicked my bishop away from a good square. And notice how his rook and his bishop are coordinating on the d1 square. So I have to be very careful about keeping sufficient control over that square so I don't walk into some terrible fork down there on the back rank. Anyway, he just went c6 here, so I wouldn't have to worry about defending his pawn. I went f3, kicking his knight away, and he went knight f6. That seems to not be the best move. Knight to d6 is slightly preferred, but it's still okay, I think. I go rook b1 here. Goes bishop back to d5. And, you know, I'm trying to get some pressure against this pawn. So I start with queen b2. And, you know, I did in that maneuver create a weak pawn here, but I've got it pretty well defended by the bishop here. And so I'm thinking this is still okay. If I can trade this pawn against one of these, then we'll create a situation where he has the weak pawn and I have a solid pawn majority here. And that would be kind of an ideal situation for my bishops. Let's see, he went knight e8 here. After knight e8, I was thinking about taking the pawn here. I think that was my original plan, but I ruled it out because after he takes here, I could take back, and then he has this move c5 with a double attack. His bishop is attacking my rook and his pawn is attacking my bishop. But when I looked at this with the chess engine actually says this is playable, although it's kind of a crazy line here. But well, here's the idea. Rook here sets up something that looks like a pin. Of course, the bishop is defended, so he can just take my bishop. But it turns out I can take his bishop too, because after he takes back, my bishop pins his rook. So anyway, a pretty deep bit of calculation. And actually, it goes on. Let's see. The chess engine takes here, bishop takes, king here as the best line, and after f4, then the idea is that I can round up this pawn with my king and just be a pawn up in this endgame, although he has chances to hold it. But there's other things that are going on here too. For example, well, let's see. I just played bishop c4. What if he just what if he just defends the rook? Well, then it turns out I can attack the rook with a pawn, so I don't have to lose a piece here. I'm still going to end up getting that rook. So in all these lines, white is just a little bit better, although not necessarily winning. But I guess the result of all that is the move that I chose, a4, is still the best move here, restraining these pawns. He got his rook to the 7th rank there, defending, and I pushed on with a5. Let's see, he went knight d6 now. and I pushed all the way on to a6. So I'm getting a situation where I managed to trade. He doesn't want to push this pawn forward and let me have this pass pawn. That would be pretty dangerous. And he can't just come forward one step to block my bishop because I'll just take it. So he takes, I take, and now we've got this situation I was talking about where I have 4 solid pawns together, and he has 2 pawn islands, 3 pawns over here and 1 pawn here, which I can put some pressure against. Let's see, he goes knight c4, so he's trying to compensate with active piece play, and I go queen c3. Already here I could have gone for the back rank and gotten a little play this way. So queen b8 check. This is kind of a long sequence. He has 2 ways to play this. He can block with the queen or he can run with the king. So blocking with the queen, this is a computer-generated sequence, of course. Let's see, I can take and then play bishop to c8. I didn't see this idea. So that's kind of neat. It's skewering the rook and threatening this pawn. So the rook has to run over here to f7. Then I can bring this rook down to the back rank. And, I've managed to get a very active position with all my pieces. And I'm threatening to win this pawn anyway because of the discovered check. And he has ways to defend. So it's not the end of the world, but it looks like a pretty good position for white. Or he could run with the king instead of blocking. And then I still have bishop to c8. Let's see, he could move the rook here. The pawn is defended now. But there's this clever tactic here. Push this pawn forward, and if he takes it, throw in this check. And after queen takes bishop, you have queen takes rook. And that seems to be good for white as well, although black has active pieces and some compensation here. But he's down the exchange. Anyway, I played the calmer move, queen to c3. He goes knight to d6. That was queen c3 was also a good move. So I'm not giving up my advantage here. And then I bring the rook down. He goes king h7 here, and I play bishop d3. And now he just blunders. So best play here is knight b5, and but this also just gives up a pawn. So I finally, I finally give up the bishop pair here, but I get the pawn, and so I'm just a pawn up. And it's not quite an endgame because we have a lot of force on the board still, but I have an advantage in this middle game. He does have opposite squared bishops, so there's still drawing chances for black in this line, but white has the advantage being a pawn up and with decent pieces. Instead he played g6, and well, it it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out that there was a mate in 1 on the board, but rook to h8 is just mate. So anyway, it was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you later. Bye.